Welcome. Tonight, we've got a special report for you, and we're pulling back the curtain on something called automated control. Now, this is a story that doesn't start in Silicon Valley with tech startups. No, it starts in the war rooms of the 1940s, and it ends with the invisible algorithms that are right now shaping your world.
So, let's kick things off with a pretty wild idea. Way back in 1977, the sci-fi author Philip K. Dick said, "We are living in a computer program reality." He might have been talking about a grand simulation, who knows, but honestly, his words were spot on. They perfectly capture the ambition of the systems we're going to look at today. Systems that were built to model, predict, and ultimately, to control us.
All right, here's the game plan for our report. We're going to start with the first calculating machines of World War II. And then we'll see how those same tools were turned into instruments of domestic surveillance. After that, we'll get into the science of control itself. And then we've got a special pullout section on a really chilling Soviet theory of manipulation. And finally, we'll connect all those dots to the influence machines that are all around us today.
Okay, so our story really gets going not in some garage in California, but in the absolute chaos of the 1930s and 40s. See, the first big leaps in computation, they weren't driven by making a profit. They were driven by the brutal, urgent needs of totalitarianism and total war.
And this is a really disturbing place to start, but it's crucial. One of the first times we see large-scale data processing used in a sophisticated way, it was for mass extermination. IBM's German subsidiary actually built custom punch card systems for the Nazi regime. This allowed them to categorize, sort, and track victims based on their ancestry. It turned the industrial horror of the Holocaust into a data management problem.
At the very same time, you had this parallel race for computational power happening. Over in Germany, you had Konrad Zuse, who quietly built the world's first programmable computer, the Z3, and he used it to help design flying bombs. Meanwhile, in Britain, the now famous Alan Turing was leading that incredible code-breaking effort at Bletchley Park, desperately trying to crack the German Enigma machine.
And this is what they used, machines just like this one, the bomb. They are the direct ancestors of the computer on your desk or in your pocket. Developed from some amazing Polish designs, these huge electromechanical beasts were built for one critical purpose: to break Nazi codes. And this fusion of intelligence work and raw computation, well, it set a precedent that we're still feeling today.
So the war ends, and the world slides right into a new kind of conflict, the Cold War. And the technologies that were designed to fight a foreign enemy, they got turned around, pointed inward, and used for a brand new purpose: watching a nation's own citizens.
A really stark example of this happened during the Troubles in Northern Ireland. British intelligence built one of the most comprehensive surveillance systems in the world. It started out simple, just databases to track cars, but it quickly morphed into a whole network of AI systems. Machines with names like Castor and Mannequin could automatically sift through data and find connections between people, completely bypassing human analysts. They were building a digital panopticon over an entire population. And listen to this quote from a top British official at the time. It is absolutely chilling. It just lays bare the mindset that can take hold when you have that much unchecked power. The fact that the surveillance machine worked so well because it operated outside of democratic rules, that was seen as a good thing. It's just a perfect reminder of that constant tug-of-war between security and liberty.
But all these practical tools for surveillance and control, they needed a theory to back them up. A scientific framework to explain how you could actually manage these incredibly complex systems. And that theory, it came out of another wartime discipline called operations research.
And that theory was cybernetics. It was a term coined in 1948 by a guy named Norbert Wiener. He had worked on radar controllers during the war, and he realized something huge. He saw that cybernetics is basically the science of steering. It's the study of how any system, whether it's an animal, a machine, or even a person, keeps itself stable using feedback loops.
This simple diagram, this is the whole shebang right here. Information, a stimulus, comes in, it's processed by some kind of control center, which then tells something else what to do. And then, and this is the key part, the results of that action are fed back into the system as new information. It's a loop. This basic model, born right out of World War II research, is the foundation for pretty much all modern military command and control systems, what they call C2. And this wasn't just an abstract idea. A British cybernetician named Stafford Beer, he took this and ran with it. He created something called the viable system model. He literally modeled his theory of how to manage a company or an economy on the human nervous system.
In his world, a company could be seen as a living thing, with departments as organs and management as the brain. It's a wild concept. And now it's time for that special investigative pullout in our report. We're going to hit pause on our main timeline for a minute to do a deep dive into a parallel and, frankly, very influential field that was being developed behind the Iron Curtain, a Soviet science for controlling an adversary's mind.
Okay, so what is reflexive control? The key thing here is that it's not about winning a fight with tanks or planes. It's about winning with psychology. It's the art of feeding your opponent very specific information so that they voluntarily make a choice that helps you. You basically get inside their head, inside their decision-making loop, and convince them to defeat themselves.
And Soviet theorists, they broke this down into this terrifyingly systematic process. You see, it starts simple. Just feed the enemy some lies. But then it escalates. You start shaping their goals, their whole view of the world, and the ultimate aim? To get them to a place where you can just transfer your own pre-made decisions right into their command structure, making them act like your own puppet.
Later on, Russian theorists like this guy Makhnin, they refined this into even more detailed models. Now, this diagram looks really complicated, I know, but the idea is to show how you can use different kinds of inputs, real things like troop movements, informational things like news reports, and psychological things like propaganda, and convert them into predictable actions from your adversary. It's basically a blueprint for a machine that weaponizes thoughts and emotions.
So let's bring this all home. We're now going to connect these decades-old theories, cybernetics on one side, reflexive control on the other, to the automated influence operations that have really come to define our modern digital world.
So how exactly are these Cold War theories being used today? Well, they've been put on steroids. They've been supercharged by this fusion of big data, social media, and artificial intelligence. And all of that together has created what one U.S. military major calls simply the influence machine.
And the most infamous example of this, of course, is Cambridge Analytica. Now, this was not some rogue marketing firm. It was an offshoot of SCL Group, a British defense contractor that literally worked with the UK's Ministry of Defense on social influence projects. They took military-grade psychological operations and just unleashed them onto domestic politics, automating influence on a massive, massive scale.
Look, these modern influence operations, they run at machine speed. They can target millions of individuals all at once, with messages that are perfectly tailored to their psychological profiles. And the goal is pure reflexive control. You shape their perception, you change the will of an entire population, and you get the outcome you want before any kind of physical conflict could even begin. It is, potentially, a defeat mechanism for democracy itself.
And that brings us to our final and most critical question tonight. From IBM tabulators and the code breakers at Bletchley Park, from the birth of cybernetics to the theory of reflexive control, we've traced this idea through history. But as these influence machines get smarter, faster, and more autonomous, we have to ask, who or what is really in control? And can a system that was designed from the ground up to manipulate ever be truly managed?